Well, to make a long story short, or should I say a long story shorter, either way, it's too late. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Okay, everybody, the last 2 weeks, you've been listening to me talk about my life in the year 2002. I became 24 years old and had a lot of very crazy things happen. During that time period, I've said it on both of the last 2 weeks, decisions were made and things happened that directly affected my 2003. And I wanted to tell the story of my 2003, but there was no way I was going to be able to do that in earnest without going back to 2002, which is what I've done. So tonight, as I record, very, 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 very early again, it's April 5th, 2025, which April 5th has a little bit of significance to me. It's kind of a cool day, especially this year in 2025. Um, I'll talk to you about that in fill in the blanks. But the fact that I'm doing this show very, very early is perfectly fine. Now, the reason why it is because I'm telling my story of what happened in 2003. And I can only assume, much like in 2002, I'm going to have to break down this story to at least 2 episodes. And that's just a simple calculation just based on how long it took me to do 2002. And I omitted a few things. That story could have been a little longer. And I know that there's more to unpack in 2003 than there was in 2002. In fact, in the middle of unpacking 2003, I'm going to have to revert to 2002 a few times. That's just how interlocked these 2 years for me were. And I've said it before, I've told little pieces of this story, very small ones. When the situation came up, I didn't go out of my way to mention what happened during either of these 2 years. Somebody would mention something, and if I felt that the conversation was going in a certain direction, I would then tell them something that happened to me in 2002 or in 2003. And it would be relevant to the situation that I was in during the conversation. Otherwise, I wouldn't mention 2002 or 2003 at all. And that's why, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again, that's why I want to just sort of lay it all out there and actually tell the story and let it all out, as they say. But of course, I am going to leave a little bit because there's a reason. Just know that. I will be telling a vast majority, like I did in the other story, but there's going to be a few things that I'm not going to tell because I may want to tell them later. Or I may not tell these things at all. But either way, you're going to get a lot of information from my 2003. And trust me, I don't know what you were doing in 2003. Some of you just getting out of high school, some people not even born, but I know most of my audience was certainly in that young adult role, sort of where I was during that time. And trust and believe 2003 did not go the way that I would have liked it to in any way. And that's where I'm going to start, just like I did before, January, and work my way down. And boy, I do have a story to tell. But right now, it's time to fill in the blanks. Here we go. The question that needs the blank filled in is, why did I say earlier that April 5th, 2025 was such a important date to me? Well, that blank is filled in with two separate things. The first one is, it's a month before my birthday, but by the time you listen to this, I actually would have had that birthday. Yeah, by the time you listen to this on May 10th, I would have already had my birthday, which is May 5th. And I think that's one of the reasons that April 5th, 2025 is kind of cool to me. But the other one is, it would have been a year since I began my WrestleMania weekend. I started it on April 5th, 2024. To reiterate, I went to the WWE World Big Shop that they had in the morning, and it was that Friday. I then went to Friday Night SmackDown, followed by the WWE Hall of Fame, which was directly after that on Friday. Saturday, WrestleMania Night 1 and Night 2 was on Sunday. And Monday, I completed the whole WrestleMania weekend by going to Monday Night Raw. And it's kind of interesting that it was literally a year ago as I record this. How time flies. So, once again, the question, why did I say that April 5th, 2025 was such a significant date? Number one, it's a month away from my birthday. And number two, it was a year ago that I began my WrestleMania 40 weekend. Okay, now it's time for me to ring the bell and begin the main event. Okay, 2003. My 2003. Slight recap just at the end of the month. Last 2 months of 2002, and then we're going to roll into 2003. Um, I had been given the opportunity to advance my Wawa career and make it to the first level of management of Wawa. My store manager, Steve A, was able to take an opportunity that I was trying to find somewhere else, and he gave it to me in the store that I had been working at in Lakehurst. Now, there was a transition amongst regional managers at the time of me beginning that promotional journey. Um, the regional manager, Rachel, was on her way to moving to a different region. Now, if you remember, Rachel's not her name, but that's what I'm calling her. Same thing for the new guy, Brett. He started around that same time. He started in that November time. Now, because he had never been a regional manager, he was being given a promotion from store manager to regional manager. He wanted to take some time to evaluate the stores that he was now in charge of. And he had all the people who were listed to be promoted and interviewed. And he wanted to do all of that in December instead of November, like a bunch of them were set to do, like mine was. And so I had my interview in November as planned, and it was then canceled and moved to December. Instead of being with Rachel, it's going to be with the new guy, Brett. Now, Brett gives me the interview. I apparently did something right, and the promotion was official, and it was to begin on January 1st, 2003. And that's where we start. I am officially in management at Wawa. My position is customer service leader. And as I mentioned with Jones benefits and vacation, now I get the same thing. I was given 5 days of vacation time, um, a personal day once a quarter, so four of those. Health insurance was going to be on its way. That's going to be important. Um, yeah, and a little bit more money and a lot more responsibility around the store. All these things fell into my lap on midnight, January 1st, 2003. At the time, I had a pretty fun time because if you remember, um, my coworker who advanced very quickly to the very same position, and I were working together overnight when my promotion officially began. And I had a pretty fun moment, in my opinion. It was a lot of fun because I was coming into work at 11 to 7 with Anne and Joan, who was already also a customer service leader. Both of them were. At the same time, Joan was on her way out. Me and Anne were going to work the night. I got to say the coolest thing right before Joan walked out. And I said, "Hey, Joan, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to tell you right now because it's cool to me. Just play along. Tell me to do something, anything, whatever. Tell me to do something in the store because in a little while you won't be able to." We all got a laugh out of it because at that point we were all going to be on an even playing field. And at that point, it was only suggestions that we could give to each other, but not direct orders because we were all in the same rank. I thought that was a lot of fun. And we, like I said, we had a little laugh about it. And then the night began. My first night as a manager was relatively uneventful. Just really an interesting thing happened during that time, which was, again, I think it was pretty interesting. Um, Steve T, who I mentioned earlier, was the site manager at what was the training center, came over to our store at the end of his shift at the training center. He finished up his paperwork and took out the trash that he needed to. And so he stopped over at the store knowing that I was beginning my management. First thing he did is came in, shook my hand, congratulations, we're all on the same level, but I'm going to make sure that you get better than what you are. I said, okay, that's good. He had been giving me advice the entire time, probably from the time that I really started looking into it in around September, all the way through until I've actually gotten the promotion. And at this point, he was telling me about the fact that Steve A was going to end up sending me to the management classes, and he gave me a lot of the information that I needed to know as far as how those classes work. He goes, I know you don't really like working during the day, but the management classes are during the day. And what you've got to do is you got to do these classes during the day, and it's going to take a month to finish. And you're going to have to do some things at the store, and it's going to have to be signed off by Steve A that you were doing it. It's a little bit of a process, but it's not too bad. And in the meanwhile, you're going to have days where you're going to get to work and run the store on all the shifts during this period, and they have to sign off on it. So I had to do again all three shifts, which of course was something that I was no stranger to because prior to that I had been working all the different shifts, so I had a comfort level with it. Unbeknownst to me, I was going to end up doing what I like to call the biggest nightmare of my entire Wawa career, and it lasted 6 months after uh, 2003. It all happened in 2004. And during that, we're not going to get into it too much. I'm just going to say that there was a point in time where I had to work shifts in this manner. I would work a 3 to 11 shift. Then the next night, I would work 11 to 7. Then the next day, I would work 3 to 11 again. Then I would work 7 to 3. And I'd finish that by working another 3 to 11. Then I had another set of days where I would work 11 to 7. And then I would work another 11 to 7. Then I would work 3 to 11, followed by 7 to 3. And then I would work another 11 to 7. Where not only was I working all three shifts, but I ended up working all three shifts in 1 week. And all three shifts back to back to back. I called it the gauntlet. It was probably the worst 6 months of my life. I did it for, like I said, 6 months in 2004 as a manager, and I got to a point where I told the manager, who was not Steve A, it was a different manager, I told him, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. It completely reversed my day. I could no longer sleep at night, and I could only sleep in the morning between times of 7 in the morning and 3 in the afternoon, which really messed me up when I had to work 7 to 3. It was a horrible situation. But back to 2003, where we're actually pointing it. Now, I had been working pretty diligently and consistently, and at this time, I was mostly focused on the two later shifts, the 3 to 11 and the 11 to 7. However, because I was eventually going to need to move to do some 7 to 3s because of the training that I was going to have to go through. And that's kind of the way it worked out. Every once in a while during January, at the end, I think I worked maybe 2 Saturdays. It was a Saturday and a Sunday. I can't remember which one it was, but this is before I got my official training classes. And when you work 7 to 3, you have to do what we called MUN, which essentially is you take all the money that was collected during the day, and of course, during that time period, there was a lot of cash. What you had to do is take the deposits that were dropped off from the cash registers, and you had to bundle it with the money that was in the electronic safes in the front that were counting the larger bills, the 20s, the 50s, the hundreds when they showed up. All that money needed to be gathered, put into a deposit bag, and put in the inaccessible safe until the uh, the armored car came to pick it up. Now, during that process, you also had to um, take the paperwork, which said how much was made during that day, and it was be cumulative throughout the week. So the paperwork would show up and it would keep going, and the final piece would have the information of how much was made that week up until that point. And you had to separate all that paperwork and put it aside and send it up to the corporate office, which of course, I don't know if they still do it. It'd be stupid if they didn't. Their mail system went through the milk. Everything went through the milk. So you would take that packet of paper and you'd stick it in an empty milk carton, empty milk crate. And when the drivers came to deliver the milk, they would take the milk crate, put it aside, take all the old milk, put all the new milk in. And that was an important thing they had to do during the day. And of course, I got to do it a couple times and I was a little unsure of what I was doing. And of course, no major mistakes were made, but it was with the paperwork. The actual money was fine. I did that and it was accurate and there wasn't any issues. But the paperwork was a little bit off and I had to rely on Anne and Joan to give me a little bit of a crash course on how to do it until I finally was able to take the classes in February so that I would be able to have a real base of how to do it. And ultimately, that's really how my January went. I was in management and I was sort of learning as I was going. Now the month of February comes around. February is very, very different. February just has some stuff going on in it that makes me go, what was I thinking? But here it is, the month of February. I come into work really not assuming very much, just doing what I normally do on my 3 to 11 shift. I come in, I get started, do my work, the shift ends, and I go home. But I'm actually hungry. So before I go home, I went to Walmart, which was open 24 hours at this point. It was kind of cool. The Walmart in Tom's River. I would shoot down there, and I picked up a DiGiorno, a pizza. And I said, you know what? I think I'm just going to eat this thing, stay up a few more, little bit, watch a little TV, and then go to bed. Now, at this point, everything seems perfectly normal. Cook the pizza, eat the pizza, and I'm watching TV, and next thing I know, I feel something running down my face. I don't know what it is. Wipe my face underneath my nose, and my nose is bleeding, and it's bleeding pretty good. Like I had to get up, I put the head up in the air, squeezed it, probably 15 minutes, and it stopped. And then I went to bed, and I didn't really think twice about it. I just said, "Oh man, nosebleed. Don't know why, but we're just gonna not even worry about it." About 3 days later, it was about 3 days, I end up coughing, and I'm not thinking much of it. Just a little cough, and we're not talking 2020, so it's not COVID. I just assume it's February, it's cold, been around a lot of people inside the store. I'm getting a cold. Sometimes that happens to me, particularly when I had colds, my nose would bleed. Every once in a while it happened, but we're talking maybe once every, I don't know, maybe a few years, I'd have a nosebleed during a cold before blowing my nose. But I didn't really pay much attention to it. 3 days after the nosebleed, I started coughing. And it was a light cough. And I'm thinking, man, I'm definitely getting something. Just great. It was just in time for me to get ready to start my management classes. And so I go ahead, the classes begin, and I'm meeting some new people for the first time. And the information's pretty good. And I'm feeling like, okay, I didn't know that. Or every once in a while, something I felt really good about because Steve T had actually informed me about this months ago, so I was a little ahead. and I kind of felt like, the smart guy in class. So that was maybe the first couple days of class was going by, and then I go to the store and I have to do homework, or I should say store work that they assign you to do. And I'm talking to Steve A and start coughing again. And this is now, I don't know, after the cough started, maybe another day. And I'm talking to Steve A and he's showing me some things. And my nose started bleeding again. And I was like, this is not good. Tapped it off. Stopped in about 5 minutes. Didn't really think anything of it again. I'm like, oh man, I know I'm definitely getting sick. I'm thinking, I don't know what's going on. And I just continued on my merry way. During this point in time, I'm going to class the next week and I'm coughing a little bit more. And at the end of the night, while I'm working in the store, I'm still kind of coughing, but it's a very light, subtle, consistent, dry cough. I'm not really thinking much of it. And a few customers here or there come in and they hear me coughing and they get their cigarettes and they go, oh boy, that cigarette smoke is getting to you, huh? You're starting to smoke a little bit too much. I'm like, no, I don't smoke, I told them. And this happened maybe 6, 7 times in a week. Customers would say, oh, cigarettes got you, huh? And I'm like, no, I don't smoke. And this, like I said, it would 6, 7 times over this week in February. And my nose had been bleeding again. It happened a third time within a week and a half. My nose had bled 3 times. And I'm just 24 and thinking, it's no big deal. And just keep rolling through, paying it no mind at all. Because I'm still really kind of focused on my management classes, which are going well. And everything seems okay. Now, and the other CSL that I was working with a lot more because she ended up doing a lot more overnights and second shifts, the 3 to 11. We talked and she was like, boy, you've been sick, sounding like coughing. I don't know what kind of cold you have. You know, the whole joke, stay away from me with that cough you got there, right? And we just sort of laughed it off. And I just said, yeah, it's whatever it is, it'll be fine, I guess, right? And I took some Dayquil and NyQuil for a week. And it seemed as if the cough had stopped. And this is fully through the second week of February, maybe even closer to the third week of February, because it was closer to the end of my management classes coming to an end. And at this point, I was not really paying attention, but sort of paying attention, if you know what I mean, to the fact that when I was getting ready for work on this third week of February, yeah, it was third week of February, I'm gonna put my pants on, and they're like really, really loose, like stupid loose, like surprisingly loose. Now, the last time I had weighed myself was probably, I don't know, November, December, because at one point I used to keep track of it all. I liked to stay around 250 when I was throwing shot put and discus, and at this point, it had been about 3 years since I had stopped throwing. So I actually dropped about 10 pounds, 15 pounds, and I was floating, and most of my weight was sitting around 230 pounds. But my pants always fit just right. I could wear a belt, or I didn't have to. But for some reason, now all of a sudden, like 3 weeks into February, didn't do anything different, didn't eat anything different. I'm having a real hard time putting my pants on. They're just, they're falling down. I put a belt on, and the belt seemed like it was doing okay. Now, about 3 or 4 days later, it seemed like the pants were even looser than they were when I first started putting the belt on. Wasn't really concerned about it. 24, just thinking, I don't know, maybe I'm moving around a little bit more as a manager than I did when I was a regular employee, because now instead of just staying still, sitting at the register, or staying still, sitting in the deli, I'm now moving from the office to the back cooler to the freezer outside. I'm all over the store, so I'm getting my steps in. Now, if there was the smartwatches at that point in time, I'd have probably walked easily during work. I would have to say easily 7 to 10,000 steps just while I was walking around that small store, because I had to be into everything and I had to be all around. So I noticed all this stuff as I was moving around, but I could only contribute the fact that I understood uh, how my diet worked because of all the training I was doing. I knew that, well, if I'm still eating about the same amount of food, but now I'm doing more exercise, I'm going to burn more of those calories off. It's just going to be simple. I didn't eat more, but I'm doing more. So the more exercise is going to burn more calories. So I assumed that just because I was just more active now doing this working around the store and management, I was dropping weight. And I just sort of let it go, just move past it. At this point, it's now the fourth week of February, and the end of February at this point, yeah, fourth week. And again, I've noticed a significant amount of weight loss. Like, I've probably lost another 5 or 6 pounds over this 2 week period of time. I've probably lost, just a rough estimate, 20 pounds maybe in my mind. And I'm like, a lot of moving around. Got to the point where actually customers began to notice that I had lost a considerable amount of weight. And they're like, whoa, you doing a diet? And I'm like, no, I'm not on any diet. Yeah, because you were probably a lot bigger than you were before, but now you just seem like you lost a lot of weight. We do notice that you've been moving around a lot more while you were working since you got your promotion. So that's what I was telling them too. I'm thinking that's probably what it was. That I'm just moving around a lot more now that I got this promotion. At this point, I was finished with the management classes, and all was going well. I had a stronger command of how to do the daily money at the end of in the morning shift. I was fully aware and functional of everything I needed to do during the overnight shift as well as the 3 to 11 shift, and I was feeling pretty confident. That last 2 months between January and February, and all the time that I had spent with Steve T working with me, I was feeling myself, and I think I was right in the right path in management. I could handle this. I could do this, and I was feeling comfortable. And then came the first week of March, and stuff started happening that was really, really a little off. And it actually got my attention a little bit this time. In March now, I discovered that my nose started bleeding again. And in fact, it happened 2 days in a row in the early part of March. And I was a little bit nervous about that because it hadn't happened for a couple of weeks, but now it's back. And I started losing a little bit more weight to the point where I had to start putting the holes in the belt. And this is maybe 3 weeks. And I was starting to put like holes. Like I went past the ones that were already there and I made like three more holes. And it had been 3 weeks, give or take. I'm losing significant amount of weight and my nose is bleeding on a semi-regular basis. I had, like I said, it bled a couple days in a row. And the fact that it hadn't happened in a while and it started to happen more frequently made me think, I don't know, not really sure what's going on here, but maybe there's something to this. I don't know. During that first week of March, another thing happened, and this one totally threw me off because I was just in pain, very much in pain, like intense pain that I couldn't quite understand. And for a guy who already had at this point had two knee surgeries, I kind of understood what the pain was going to be, but I expected it eventually in my life, because I was a wrestler, I was a football player, but more so, I was a shot putter and discus thrower, meaning I put tremendous pressure on my ankles when I was doing the spin and the discus and the glide and the shot put. I had figured that one day that was going to catch up with me, putting all my pressure on my one ankle at a time, doing those rotations, doing that spin for the discus and the glide technique and the shot put. I just assumed that it was going to catch up to me. And apparently it caught up to me faster than I thought. I thought that in 2001, whenever it was I stopped, it was one of those 2 years. 2001, last time I threw. I thought 2 years later, now all of a sudden, it's starting to hit me. And I took my work boots off because I used to wear work boots all the time when I was working at Wawa. And my ankles were swollen. And my thought was, they hurt really bad and they're swollen. And I'm not really happy about this because it's like, gotta start taking something to sort of like alleviate this pain. And that's what I did. I started taking Aleve. And unbeknownst to me, the ankles were not just swollen, but there was little dots on them. And I just assumed because I was really bad and still am really bad with using lotion that I must have just had dry ankles and with the combination of the swelling from walking around the store all the time and the wear and tear from throwing shot put and discus, I just got to take some Aleve and that'll cover it. Now, one of the other things that I had to do, like I said, as a manager, I like to fill the cooler. I could have assigned somebody else to do it, but I was 24. I was young, fast, strong, even at a heavier weight that I was at. I could do things, and I was, again, strong. One of my favorite things to do during February, going back to February for a second, was test myself with the milk. Um, we would have gallons of whole milk and all the other flavors of milk, and they're all in there. And what I would do is I would try to stack it up because when they brought it in, they would stack it 6 milk crates high, and I would do my best to see just how many milk crates I could push. And in February, I hit my max. I actually pushed It was one, two, three, four, five, 6 stacks of milk. I was able to push 6 stacks of milk, and fortunately, they didn't fall. So now, hear me out. The reason why I mention that is because I was physically strong enough to push 6 stacks of milk. Now, 6 stacks of milk with 4 gallons of milk in each milk crate, 24 in each sack. That's a lot of milk, and it weighed a lot. Now, I could have been hurt badly if I messed up and the stuff fell on me, but that's not the point. I was strong enough to push it. Back to March. My ankles were hurting real bad. I was still pushing milk. And for those couple days in the first week of March, I was pushing that 4 sacks of milk. And then I went down to 3. And then I realized I went down to 1 because I just physically didn't have the strength to push the milk. Like I was getting weaker instead of stronger. And again, at 24, I just figured because my ankles are hurting, I'm not trying to do anything too much because my ankles are hurting. And I just took some more leave. That was my answer to it. More leave. And this is where things got really interesting because over the next week, I realized that I had taken half a bottle of leave in that first week. My ankles still hurt. And of course, what's the solution to that? Instead of taking less leave, I took even more that next week. So I finished a bottle and a half of leave the next week. Of course, during that period of time, my nose bled 2 times that week. And then it started happening where I would find myself still eating the regular amount that I was eating, and the weight was still coming off, and I still had this cough. And I would then go to Pathmart because Pathmart was also open 24 hours, and I'd go there and I would get um, DiGiorno's from Pathmart because I didn't have to go on the main road, and I could just slip through, go to Pathmart, go back home. And I would go ahead and I would make that DiGiorno. And this is the second week of March, I believe. Yeah, second week of March. And what would happen was I would eat the pizza, feel pretty good watching TV, then all of a sudden my stomach just started killing me. And I went, oh, this isn't good. Ran upstairs where the bathroom was and immediately just threw up. Just horribly, horribly sick. And after I got done, my stomach stopped hurting. And I'm like, oh man, don't tell me that pizza was bad. Where my head was at. The pizza had to be bad. Now, I don't know why. It's the first time it happened. Second week of March. Then later that week at work for the first time, my nose started bleeding. And it was really a bad one. I was working overnight and it just started gushing blood. And there was an EMT in there in the store. And he ran and knocked on the bathroom door and he looked at me because it had been bleeding for probably over 15 minutes or so. And he just kept telling me to do what I was doing. And he stayed with me until it stopped. And everything was good for a while. Now, my ankles were still hurting and I was still taking a lead on a overly regular basis, probably taking 3 to 4 leaf pills at a time, several times a day. I can't say that it was less than 4 times. There's no way it was less than four. It was at least 4 times that I would take at least 4 pills. And I ran through another bottle. And this trend continued. I would then go get another DiGiorno because obviously I believed at 24 years old that if I did something one time and I got a result, if I did it again, I get a different result. So I figured, hey, if I eat another DiGiorno, I'm not going to throw up. And sure enough, I didn't. I was cool. But the next two DiGiornos I got in the bathroom, couldn't hold it, throwing up immediately, extraordinarily sharp stomach pain, and then it would stop after I threw up. My ankles were still swollen and they were still hurting, and I was still coughing. And I was like, man, work is miserable because I go in there and I feel decent, with the exception of the fact that now my physical strength has depleted. Like I'm weak. I couldn't even. I had a tough time picking up one milk crate full of milk at this point in time, and this is now 3 weeks into March. I'm only picking up one milk crate, just one, not anymore. I'm beginning to realize that I'm completely out of gas physically after going to work maybe 3 hours. I got nothing left, like zero in the energy department. I have no more gas left, like none. I'm totally drained. I got nothing left. And I'm coughing, and this is maybe 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, almost 3 weeks into March, where I have no physical strength and I'm tired, like really tired. Like sleep 10 hours, wake up, and could probably go to sleep for the 10 hours. My days off were the weirdest because I could just be sitting in the living room without moving or doing anything for about 3 hours and wouldn't even realize the time had passed. I'd just be sitting there with not a bit of energy to stand up. A couple times, I'm embarrassed to say, I almost peed my pants because I was just out of energy to the point where I just did not want to get up. But fortunately, those couple times I did get up and I did use the bathroom. Now, by the end of March, I had probably, I'm going to my mind now, I'd gotten the DiGiornos, and it was specifically DiGiornos because they were just easy to cook. I didn't have to think about it, and I just put them in there and I was done. But I probably ate about 7 or 8 of them in this 3 week period of time, 4 week period of the end of March, and I had thrown up every week in March at least one time, and the last week it was twice, and I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm just gonna go ahead and continue on because that's kind of what you do, right? Keep on going. Whew. This is the part where it gets really crazy. I'm working an overnight shift in April now, probably the first week of April. And Anne is looking at me as I'm pretty much dragging my body around the store with very little gas in the tank. And this is just from walking in. And Anne looks at me like, you don't look good. And I'm looking at her like, thanks. was like, no, you really don't look good. You look like you've lost even more weight than you had prior. Yeah, I think I'm down a little bit more. At this point, I have gotten, like, my belt is even more holes in it because I had lost even more weight. Now, mind you, in my mindset, the last time I weighed in, I was 240 pounds. I don't know how much I weigh now, but I know it's not 240. That's for certain. And this is in April. You should maybe go get that looked at. I don't know. You should go check out because you really don't look good at all. And I was like, maybe my next week because I got a weekday next week because I was specific and I designated Tuesdays as one of my days off. And during this first week, when she actually told me about it, it was probably Wednesday, Thursday. So I said, next week I'll go. I'll go to the emergency room. If it's still bad, I'll go. And Joan had come in that morning and she looked at me and she's like, yeah, you really do not look good at all. Now, Steve A and Beth, the assistant manager, were in and out. Like we were in passing and there wasn't a whole lot of interaction between us at this point in time. So they didn't quite see my deterioration the same way that Anne and Joan had. At the same time, same thing with Steve T. He noticed that I was getting pretty bad. And again, he actually told me that I should probably go see somebody that week as well when Beth had, not Beth, when Anne was kind of getting on me to do so. So now my peers are now looking at me like, well, you're losing a lot of weight. You look really tired and you're not doing a whole lot of moving around. We think you should probably see a doctor. And I told them I'm going to go if I have another incident. And of course, that Sunday, I get my DiGiorno and there it goes again. Not even thinking, just a little bit where I said that I was eating the same amount of food. I mean, the fact that I would eat these pizzas, which was one of my entire meals, and I would be throwing it up every single time, meaning that I didn't get anything out of that meal. And so I said to myself, I will definitely go on Monday instead of Tuesday. So I called out that Monday, the second week of April, and I just go to the emergency room, and I go in there, and I'm coughing, and I tell them what was going on. So this is all the stuff that's been happening. I've had these nosebleeds, which I told them I haven't had one in like a week and a half now. I've been coughing like this, and my ankles are swelling, and they've been driving me nuts, and they've been hurting like crazy. And then the worst thing of all of this is I keep throwing up, and that's the thing that I would like to stop more than anything else. Forget the cough, forget the nosebleed. This throwing up is just driving me nuts. It was at a point where it was actually kind of funny. My mom thought that I wasn't really as sick as I said I was, because after I threw up, she was like, no, it's not as bad as you think it is. And I thought to myself, yeah, it must not be. So I just kept on rolling. And then I got confirmation from the hospital when I was there. They said, well, we ran a bunch of tests. We took your blood. We don't see anything weird. We're going to tell you should just take some minor pain medication for your ankles. When I told them I was doing that, I was taking some Aleve. I told them some. I didn't tell them how much I was taking. I told them I was taking some. And they said, well, um, if you have any more problems, just come back. And so I left. This is the same hospital that 2 years later, I have to just bring that up. This is the same hospital that 2 years later I was going to go to after I hurt my ankle, and the person who looked at the x-ray didn't notice that I had a break in my ankle. In fact, not just any break, but I broke the little bone in the back of your foot completely off. It snapped. They didn't see it in the x-ray. Just saying. But now I come back to work on that Wednesday, and Ann and Joan were there, and Steve A was gonna no, not Steve A. Steve T was working overnight, and they all asked me, "Hey, you feeling better?" I'm like, not really, because at this point I'm starting to acknowledge that I'm not feeling great, and I just was like, things are not feeling to the point where I should, and I continued to work for another 2 weeks. And during this time period, I was really not doing the best work that I was going to do. Steve T noticed that there was a definite decline in my work from the beginning of March till this point, where I had gone up from January to about the end of February. I was doing really good work, and then the whole month of March until the April, it just started going the other direction. And he's like, I don't know, you're still not feeling great because your work is not what it was. And I was like, I don't know, it is what it is. And I just was feeling really tired all the time. I had that cough consistently. My ankles would not stop hurting. But it wasn't pain that I realized after I broke my ankle. It was more like stabbing little pain, almost like electric shocks, or little somebody taking pins and just constantly just stabbing me in the ankles. And it was both of them. And I don't know why I associated that with ankle pain from throwing, but I did. And I knew that there was something not quite right over the next couple of weeks. I continued to persevere, as you might say. And then I had what I like to call the uh-oh moment. And that uh-oh moment was during that time period of the last couple weeks of April. My nose bled like twice a week for 2 weeks, and I would still throw up a lot at this point, but it was only one time a week, twice a week. Twice a week I throw up. My nose would bleed 2 times, 3 times a week during that period of time. So I was bleeding and I was throwing up, and I lost even more weight. And then it happened. I was about to go into work, and I'll never forget the date because it was April 30th, the last day of the month. And I want to say, I can't remember what day it was. It felt like it was a Saturday because I got this horrible pain in my stomach, and it was unrelenting. It was the same pain that I felt right before I threw up. But instead of having the pain right before I threw up and then it going away, this was, I hadn't eaten anything, and the pain was just there, and it was just writhing. It was even worse than it was before I threw up. At this point in time, I knew, something ain't right. I told my mom I got back to the hospital. I'm really feeling just terrible. Like my stomach is just killing me, and it's totally different. This is not the same as it was the first time. This is so different that I need to I need to do something before I go to the hospital because I've always wanted to do this, which is kind of the same way that I thought the year before when I did my pizza vacation. I said I wanted to do this. What did I want? I took my mom. We went to the Old Country Buffet. No longer exists. But man, I went there and I want to say, I can't remember now. It was so long ago. I don't remember if it was breakfast or if it was lunch. But I know that I had done something that I wanted to do because my wrestling coach had told us to do this before the practice, the first practice of the year. Because the first practice of the year was during the Thanksgiving break, and it was the Friday after Thanksgiving. And what he would say, good old wrestling coach Tab, I'm going to use his name because he was a great coach. What he said was, what I want you to do on this Thanksgiving is I want you to eat and eat and eat and eat and then throw up and then go eat some more because wrestling season's coming up and you're not going to be able to eat like that no more. And so I said to myself, I feel so awful that that's exactly what I want to go to. Went to the Old Country Buffet. Boom, boom, boom. Loaded up 2 plates. Ate everything on those 2 plates. Immediately got up and went to the bathroom and threw up. Went back, loaded it up, got a couple more plates, ate all that stuff, threw up again in the Old Country Buffet, the restaurant. So I had eaten about 4 plates of food and I threw up everything I ate. And I was just about to, I had just gotten another plate of food to do it a third time. And I sat down, I started eating it. And halfway through, I had to go throw up. And when I went to go back to go try to finish it off, my mom said, "Nope, that's it. We're going to the hospital right now." And so I did. I went to the hospital, and I think that this is April 30th, 2003. Yeah, looking at the clock, and I haven't even gotten to the real fun stuff yet. So I'm thinking this might even be 3 shows. So we're going to hit the pause button here, and we're about to ring the bell on this. And I'm going to tell you right now that it's a good place to stop. This is April 30th. I went and I ate and ate and ate like Tab told me to do, and I threw up, and then I ate and ate and ate some more, and then I ended up going to the hospital. And this is exactly where I'm going to stop. April 30th, 2003. I had just left the Old Country Buffet, and I'm going to the hospital. And on that note, I'm going to ring the bell. Main event is over for now. Okay. We're going to go to the Spear of the Week right away. Now, what would be the appropriate person to be the Spear of the Week? Well, it would have to be the hospital personnel that I saw second week of April when they did a few tests. I was there maybe 2 hours, which is amazing to actually be in a hospital emergency room and you're there 2 hours. It's like you went to McDonald's right to the drive-through, and they didn't find anything and let me go. That was just terrible because now at the end of April, less than a month away, I'm even worse than I was when I went the first time. And maybe they could have caught something a little sooner had they actually done a little bit more or kept me. I don't know, but they didn't. So the Spear of the Week, the hospital personnel, when I went there early April 2003, no doubt, they get the Spear of the Week. Now it's time for the question. Let's see what we got today. Hmm. Hmm. That's a fun one. What is something people do you feel is the equivalent of playing Russian roulette? What is something people do that you feel is the equivalent of playing Russian roulette? Now, I imagine that most of my audience knows what Russian roulette is, but if you don't, it's when you have a revolver, a gun. You put one bullet in it, you spin that revolver's chamber around, close it, and you fire the gun at yourself. And if you don't die, you can win to the next round. What do I think that something that people do that is like playing Russian roulette? Hmm. Hmm. I can think of something right away. Here it is. I think you're playing Russian roulette when you go to a yellow traffic light and you have somebody behind you, and instead of continuing through the light, you stop. That's Russian roulette to me because I'd like to think that if people see you slowing down at a yellow light, that maybe they'll follow suit. But as somebody who's been in more than my fair share of car accidents here in the state of Pennsylvania, and at least three or four of them, people have rear-ended me. I can certainly say I don't trust it when somebody is going to get to that point. It gives me a little chill whenever I see a yellow light. I have to know that that car is at least two car lengths behind me before I actually really consider stopping at a yellow light. Most of the time, I like to go through them because of that. In fact, one time, quick story, I was at a situation like that. Light was about to turn red. It was yellow, and there was a car behind me and a police officer on the other side of me. And I was like, all right, I'm going through this. And I ran through the red light. The car behind me was also barely stopped, just stopped. And I went through. So had I not continued through, I believe that that car that was behind me would have rear ended me. Now, the police officer on the other side rolled down the window and he said, what happened back there? I told him I made a choice. He goes, yeah, you should have chose to stop at the light. No, in my opinion on that one, I made the right choice. I went through that light because at that time, it had literally been maybe a year before we got rear-ended by somebody, and we were three cars away from the light. And the light was clearly red, and that person hit the gas and ran through. So I wasn't going to take that chance. So I would say, without doubt, yellow light with a car behind you. And you choose to slow down. That definitely feels like Russian roulette to me because I believe more times that there's only going to be that one bullet in that chamber. But I think if you keep spinning, if you keep pulling that trigger, eventually that bullet's going to get you. And that's exactly what that is, in my opinion. Well, it's time to go to the end of the show. And at this point in time, I can tell you that the cat needs water. He's letting me know. Okay, Phoenix, I'll get you some water. Just a minute. Let me just close this thing up. Well, the painting that you see in front of you is another one of one that I have created. It is a part of what I'm calling the Growth Series, and this one is simply called Tulip for obvious reasons. If you're not quite sure, I am not the ultimate when it comes to creating almost picture-like pictures from a camera. Nah, I like to have just a little bit of imagination having to come into people's minds when they see some of the work that I made. And Tulip, I actually kind of like this one more than I like the Sunflower one. Just my opinion, but who knows? Somebody else out there might think it's completely crazy, but it is what it is. Tulip, one of one, but it is three of four in my growth series. Now, like I said, when I was doing this episode, I didn't know how much I was going to get to in this story of 2003, and well, I pulled it up to the point where I'm getting sick. I'm really losing a lot of weight, and my nose has been bleeding, and I've been throwing up horribly. Stay tuned. Next week, I'm going to pick it up. Like I said, I'm going to pick it up at April 30th after my old country buffet time, and then I'm going to go back to the hospital again. But until then, you can catch me on Instagram at 510, rather, at Philip Henderson 5102. You will also be able to join my Facebook page, our Facebook page, the Lit Facebook page. Join us. There's always room for one more. Um, I've been posting quite a bit on social media, as you may notice, about a specific art show that not only am I going to, but I'll be participating in. And I strongly recommend that at this time, by the time you hear this, the art show will be um, underway because it will be May 10th. And of course, the genius who is behind this art show, just amazing. The wonderful Yolanda Houston, who I interviewed, the artist, just one of her biggest projects to date is this show. And I can't wait. I'm really excited for it. It's going to be a good time by all. Um, of course, the great Patrick Houston, the entrepreneur, will probably play a significant role in this show as well. A combination, I imagine, of technology that is going to be utilized for our entertainment, and for certain, he may actually be able to even transport some of the people and maybe even some of the art to the show. I'm excited to find out how his role comes into play. Um, well, I think that's pretty much everything tonight. I hope that you enjoyed the last 3 weeks now of me telling this larger story that I've excited to finish. But of course, like I said, there's a lot to unpack in 2003. So there's a really good chance that next week's show, which is going to be show number 208, a very specific number and a very um, important number, because show number 208 would have meant that I would have had 208 consecutive episodes with new content every week. And more importantly, 208 weeks of shows, which would be, drum roll, if there was one, my 4th year anniversary show. Now, there was a part of me that wanted to do a specific uh, show for the 4th year anniversary, but I think that it's probably going to be better served if I finish 2003. And I would certainly say that the best part of this story, or should I say, the meat of the story, the deepest part of 2003, is going to be coming next week, and it seems appropriate that the deepest part of the story is going to end up on my 4th year anniversary show. So I think that maybe I'll make a little cupcake, blow out the candle on year number 4, but at the same time, I'm gonna go and tell a really important story at this point in time. A story that I said I need to tell. So I think that's the way I'm gonna roll with it. And much like I told you the last several weeks, I have the same words of wisdom. That until I'm done with this show, it's gonna be the same words of wisdom every week. And that is, everyone has a story. Tell it. You never know who needs to hear it. And trust me, when I get into next week's show, that's the stuff that people really, really need to hear. I can't wait for it. And on that note, my name is Phil, and you just listened to The Lip